actually.
Lorena de crítica concreta.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Hello, I'm Anja. Planišček is my second name, and I come from Slovenia, very small country, used to be part of Yugoslavia. And actually we share the same history with Kuch, who was giving a lecture on Tuesday. And I invited Nina to share this lecture with me because actually we were working together in Africa in the project that I will present quickly. But really, thank you, Bernardo, for this short introduction. I mean, for your lecture, because it's a kind of good introduction to my talk, because it's also about not only thinking about architecture through drawings and that construction is not only produced by drawings, but it's a collective process which happens on the site. Not only on the site, but also months before it actually starts. And I work at the School of Architecture, I'm in Faculty of Architecture, University of Ljubljana. And 10 years ago already we actually joined a network of European schools working in Africa. And in 10 years we built 5 buildings already. And our goal is to focus on things that are missing in these countries and to go on with that. Okay, this is the pre-last one we built in Gambia, and we also have Yande here, who's from Gambia. This is the second year in Gambia, which was actually another building added, and I will present the construction of the second one. And if we go back, that was the school halfway home for street children in Uganda. Houses for doctors being built simultaneously by one of our master students. And it all really started in South Africa, when we joined this huge network of European schools, building primary social infrastructure, like schools, kindergartens, and healthcare facilities. So this was the multi-purpose hall in a large complex of school buildings. It's kind of a college. And the first one, classroom and a library. So I will not so much focus why we do it, but I think it's very important to think about things that we do it for society, and that every member of this society, wherever it is in the world, has the right to dwell well, to have access for housing, education, and healthcare facilities. And maybe it's also important to say that I'm coming from Yugoslavia. I mean, I grew up in Yugoslavia, in socialism. And still for us, the education system remained the same now in Slovenia, let's say. I mean, it's a good legacy of very socially based policies in Yugoslavia, where education was for free for everyone. And I'm still part of this system, which is, I think, really good system still existing in Slovenia. Basically, primary, secondary, university education is for free. It's basically accessible for everyone. So I really stand for the right to education for everyone. So we decided this 10 years ago to contribute to the goal of, let's say, first there were millennium goals and or sustainable development goals, and our focus is universal primary education. So we decided to join this network of building schools in less privileged countries. And our ideas are actually to combine design and build. There are many schools in Europe now actually focusing on this kind of education, architectural education, where you combine knowledge of designing with construction knowledge. And of course, we think of using, to be as sustainable in construction as possible, to use sustainable materials, sustainable techniques of using energy. And of course, our goal, one of the most important ones, is knowledge exchange. Because whenever we come to any kind of site, whether it be in Ljubljana or everywhere else, I think it's very important how you work on construction site, how you share knowledge with workers, because also our students, as you, we are not, including me. I mean, I've done all these projects already, but whenever I come everywhere, I feel like I'm starting from the scratch. So it's really important to share knowledge where there already exists. And you bring some other knowledge, and when you combine these knowledges, then you get, I guess, a good, through a collective process, you get a really good result. So, okay. Maybe it's interesting for you guys to know how we work on different projects. Usually we partner, no, not usually, but most of the time we partner with either NGOs or other schools, local, either whether it be local universities or also universities from Europe. We form partnerships also with, which is most important, with local workers and local communities. How do we do it? We usually, in partnership, we actually then organize in, let's say, Slovenian part, we organize more or less, not all, but most of the funding also, which includes from the travel and accommodation to construction costs. And usually do different sorts of events, activities to do the fundraising. I'll show you quickly later. But we basically do the fundraising for the construction of buildings through different subsidies, sponsorships, or students organize different events. Typical project phases. Because we can't go first to the site, it's usually a small team goes to the site wherever we build, and comes back with, let's say, a report from the field, the first report from the field. We usually acknowledge how people build there, what are local techniques, local materials, and so on. And then with the rest of students, we usually develop projects 1 semester or 2 semesters. It depends on the difficulty. So we do a lot of, let's say, design work, but we do also a lot of practical work. So whenever we find out which materials and techniques should be used, we try to experiment also in Ljubljana. So these are, for instance, this is a prototype of a frame, structural frame, which was used in Gambia when building a canopy in the children's playground. So we first tested, and it's not only about the test, but it's also about getting some knowledge that should be used on the site later. And for fundraising, we usually do small furniture design objects, and we sell them in auctions, or we sell them like in a way like sponsorships and stuff like this. So we also organize events like auctions, and we collect money. Or we, for instance, for many projects, we used to sell either furniture or small design objects. Also in, for instance, Ljubljana has a nice open kitchen Fridays where a lot of people meet, and in accordance with our municipality, we get a stand and we can make pancakes and collect some money for projects. And then after this first phase, we go usually to the site. And the construction itself usually takes 8 weeks. We try to squeeze it, but in these 8 weeks, because otherwise it's really actually too much, taking too much time. And it's not sustainable fund-wise. Yeah. Okay, so as I said, we are trying to use local techniques, maybe in a modernized way. So in South Africa, go back a little bit. So for instance, in South Africa, we were using technique of making walls with straw and clay. It's an old technique, but let's say a little bit more developed. It's about making a mixture of straw and clay and then using ramming as a building technique. And for instance, we also develop, for instance, furniture we develop out of these simple tubes for installations. You can see it here. And that's how it looked, the library after construction, so no books yet, but they were to come. And for instance, interesting here, what you see is the ceiling, which is made of cardboard tubes, which were just leftovers from some local factory. In Uganda, we started to use another technique, which we used also then later in Gambia. We realized that in Uganda, usually people build with burnt clay bricks, just normal ones, but it's a very unsustainable way of construction because it takes, for burning the bricks, people use a lot of wood. So the whole parts of forests are actually getting extinct. So we focused on the technique of earth compressed bricks. And we actually made bricks on the site via, if you continue, with the aid of this manual press. So you can produce around 200 to 300 bricks per day. And then it's actually just a mixture of soil, some cement, and water. Of course, the mixture depends on the soil. We were also there like a year before. Yeah.
How do you mix all the elements?
You mix it with, sorry, you see the guy there in the right corner? You mix, you actually excavate the soil, add, let's say, 1-2% of cement. It depends on the soil quality. You add some water. You mix it and then you put it into this mold. You see the cast, this cast of a press, and then you press it, and it's very compact. And then you dry it for 2 to 3 weeks. So, and when it is dry, it can be used for construction. And with bricklaying, you use much less cement than with normal just burnt bricks. That's also a benefit. So yeah. That's the building, how it looked then later. Okay. And another thing which we focus a lot on is good use of energy. I mean, like controlling the temperature in the spaces. It depends, of course, in each country we are working on. We analyze the climate characteristics, and according to this, we developed certain ventilation system. So this is ventilation system, for instance, in South Africa. And then, of course, you see these strange chimneys. Actually, they're supposed to suck the cold air out of the inner space. And the other side of the building is actually designed to collect energy, to collect sun energy, because this glazing, you see, it's actually double glazing made out of double plastic, and the air actually hits in between. So it actually warms up the inside space. Okay. Yeah, it was a multi-purpose hall for kids. And now we will just, with Nina together, because Nina was part of the team, we'll quickly present how the construction worked in Gambia in the last project where we did nursery school. So maybe it's interesting for you guys because you're on the side and we really focused on to show how we did it. Gambia is the smallest continental country in Africa, a very tiny country with 50 kilometers of Western Atlantic coast, and it stretches then into inland along the river Gambia. and that's, for instance, we were working in Brufut, which is continuation of conurbation, I would say, on the western coast, going from Senegambia, which is a very touristic part of Atlantic coast, I would say, Gambian Atlantic coast. And then in Brufut, it's a kind of newly developing area, basically for more wealthy people, but there is a part called Ghana Town, where a lot of ex-migrants from Ghana live, and that's the place that we were actually building a school. And the school was the whole project went in collaboration with Gambian Slovenian NGO called Kids Are the Word, and we were also collaborating with Gambian Technical Training Institute. We collaborated with students, so we built it together, our students, Gambian students, and around 10 to 15 local workers. So it was a really collaborative construction process. This NGO otherwise works in Mobeta Primary School in Serekunda, but they decided to build their own learning center with a focus on vocational training to get more opportunities for young people to get later better employment. So that was our site. We visited it 3 years before, a year before we went there to build first the canopy. And we really decided that we do it in several phases because the program that this NGO proposed was rather large, but the site itself is around 250 square meters big, and it will the whole project will be built in several phases. So we just complied. Now we finished actually first 2 phases. So in 2018, as a kind of first phase, we built a small canopy with students, and we built it in 3 weeks. And our goal was just to try to see which techniques work and how it all works before we start building a big building with 3 classrooms for nursing school. So that was the second phase that was just built this March, at the end of, February and March. And the other phases, which you see here, phase 3, 2 buildings with classrooms and administration and kitchen, and in the end, accommodation will be built by locals themselves. So it's not the idea that we're together all the time, but the idea is also that from the techniques that we develop, people continue, locals then continue to build on their own. So yeah, on the left you see the first phase, which was then later used. While we were building the nursery school, was used as a kind of covered working space, but it's basically covered playground for local kids. Because this, maybe we go on. However, the drawing is important, I would say. Because also, I think that somehow architecture process also goes through a drawing, and thinking architecture also goes through a drawing. And of course, our students are required not only to do construction, but also to be able to provide construction plans. So that's all part of the course. It's not only building, it's also being able to produce construction drawings. And what is really important, what already Bernardo said, is how to make these drawings to be understandable for everyone. And through drawing, I think, and not only computer drawing, there are many sketches which also are part of the process on the site, because every day we're actually, in the evening, usually mentors, with students, we were or usually redesigning the things that we had, because on the site, everything changes all the time. So you have to be able, through a drawing, also to control the building process and the things that change, so that you are able to actually follow the changes. But our main idea was actually, if you check this is a cross section. Our main idea was to design a building, classrooms that would allow for good climate. And Gambia has very humid and very warm summers, but then there are months, I mean it's a rainy season, dry season, rainy season, dry season, but basically in dry season the temperature is lower, whereas in rainy season the temperatures are actually higher. But we wanted to allow for really good cross ventilation and allow for the breeze from the Atlantic to actually go through the building. So you can see it here, and we wanted to achieve this good ventilation with, we were thinking about designing the walls themselves as a kind of ventilation walls, and also we were thinking about the section, about how the air can actually go through the space between primary roof and the secondary roof. And we see the shape of the truss itself actually corresponds to the airflow. We will see it actually a little bit later. Yeah, okay. And we use the same, but of course adapted to Gambian, to the soil that we found on the site. We used air-dried compressed bricks. So we decided to use this technique. This technique is maybe the future of more sustainable construction. Can you go further? Yeah, it was, but this time we didn't do it on our own. We actually made a collaboration with a local firm which produces these earth compressed bricks. They have it in, yeah, which one is that? Earthworks construction. Earthworks construction. It's called Alpha. Is the man. Yeah. I have also his second name, but I don't remember. But they produce earth compressed bricks in different sizes and different shapes. So you can build a lot with them. And we decided for one type, and we use this type to make also this kind of a bricklace. Otherwise, the most common technique for construction, at least in urban areas, is cement brick, which you can see here. People make these cement bricks usually on their own. They use a lot of cement, a lot of sand as well, because the soil here is rather sandy. But the problem is that, of course, you use a lot of cement, and cement is rather expensive. And of course, as we know, concrete is, after water, one of the second most used substance in the world, and causing a lot of environmental problems. So we wanted really to find a material that would be more sustainable, also in this way. Not only because also the price is quite close. Price of the earth compressed bricks is quite close in the end to this ones. Yeah, okay, as I already said, maybe it was not so obvious in a previous slide, but our basic structure frame is composed of very simple L profiles. And it has, you can see here, is a primary roof and the secondary roof, which is made of textile. And the air actually goes through this space, and it actually cools a little bit down the spaces. And also, you will see later in the images that the secondary roof has a hole for the hot air to go out, because the hot air is lighter and it actually moves up. You can see it here in this image of finished classroom. Yeah. Okay. So maybe you.
Yeah. So I joined. So the whole construction lasted for 8 weeks, and I joined. And students were divided in 2 groups. And then in the middle they were on the site all together. And I joined as one of the coordinators for 3 weeks. And maybe something I can say about how we divided the work. who were in different groups, depending on which process we were doing. So there was a group for digging and leveling the earth, and then the group for metal work and group for sanding and painting. That was an interesting plant that we came across all over, and it's very common. It's like a wild plant, and you don't see it so much. Like you see it as a bush, but then when you try to dig it out of the earth, it's this is what comes out. So that was actually taking a lot of time, because every time we tried to, when we were like digging there for the foundation, we came across many of them. So this is how we, because the building consisted of 24 frames. So they had of course the foundation on each side, and then we so we had to dig them out, and we used for that like the timber profile and water level, and then we put some like base concrete to level them.
You have to work with tools which are very basic, very simple. And our basic tools, if you go even back. What are the basic tools on the site? Maybe you don't use them here, but it's actually every every mason will show you these tools, and these are water level, water pipe level. I don't know if you know it, but it's a basic thing for controlling the levels of any, either the ground slab or foundation or everything. But we use this simple device like a transparent tube with water, because water always on both sides, if you have them, like two parts or two ends of the pipe, actually the water is always on the same level. So we usually use this very simple thing for controlling every level of the building. And another important thing is just the spirit level and the plumb and ropes. So you basically work without, except for welding, then later. But for this, just simple, first to setting up the building and everything, you work with very simple tools. Yeah. Okay, so just go on.
And maybe here it's interesting that for the foundations we use the barrels that we cut in half.
Like used oil barrels. We use them for casts for concrete bases of the pillars. And this is how we actually did the setting up the building, and then marking for foundations. And you see the ropes, and the intersection of ropes are exact positions for structural frames.
And that also took like time also then to double check the length in both direction and the diagonal, and then it's not fitting, and then like the first two are perfect, and then with every more like the tolerance was also more acceptable.
But still, if you actually, it's very important, for you architects to be, if you use a steel structure and then you use bricklaying, if you actually make mistakes with steel structure, bricklaying doesn't work well. Because you're out of the level. So we have to be super precise despite very basic techniques.
You are precise about like in millimeter?
In millimeter. In millimeter. And it's actually about how, it's very important to never maybe think about it when you draw, like, foundation concrete, which is a light concrete, basically 5 to 10 centimeters of concrete that you actually pour into the foundation. And then the next day you check if in all the foundations, the concrete is on the same level. If it is not, you have either to take it out a little bit or add it a little bit. And we made so many mistakes this year that it was a headache. But we managed it. But it's important, because if one frame is then higher than the other, you can't connect them. And bricklaying is how to say, outer borders. Yeah, it's important to be precise.
And this is the preparation for secondary
Beams.
So they put the primer and then the color, and they left where the beam is going to be welded, they left the joints without. So
that was the welding team. We made a simple, cast, not a cast, but a framework for the structure frames to be welded together. So it was quite complicated because they were made of L frames, but however, we managed. So you can see it here is this our basic structure element, the frame, IP columns and trusses made of L profiles. So this is how we lifted them up, hand by hand. I mean, it was all the handwork.
Yeah, with ropes and being really careful, and then being really precise again about the position and then in the end we have that we put 2 frames each day, and it was like a good rhythm of producing 2 and painting 2 and then putting up the 2 from last day.
Yeah, and then because we knew we had a really short period of time, we actually structured the whole construction process that many phases could go on simultaneously. So as far as we had 8 frames up, we started to pour concrete for the base. Somewhere where, of course, I guess you will ask me, why did you use concrete?
I did last year.
You did, but here the answer is there are many, many termites, and it's still the most, sustainable way in terms of, I would say, long-lasting.
Talk to Anna, maybe.
Maybe, yeah, okay. So we actually put up the frames and simultaneously already poured concrete for the slab.
Yeah, so we always put, we were working with wooden frames, and we always put every second, we made every second frame, and then the next day the ones in between. And then another group would start with the secondary metal groups.
So you can see how it grew slowly, the structure, and then you can see that it was not even, the slab was not done till the end when we started to build up, to do the bricklaying. So yeah, and then slowly the building started to get shape. And we developed a special, it's not a technique, but we decided to do we call it the bricklace, which allows for good ventilation. You can see how it is formed here. But another feature which was important for us was that we actually designed kind of alcoves, and this perpendicular way, actually this short, we called it a tail or something, allowed the structural stability of this part. Otherwise, you usually need something more structural at the end of the brick board. So we decided actually to use this element as a kind of a structural element, and also as an element you will see later, we put actually benches inside. So we created niches for children to sit outside.
Yeah, and then with this brick, it's for example interesting how it changed, like something that we that was drawn in advance, and then when we got the bricks, they were in different sizes that were planned, and it was planned like exactly matching brick laying, and then we had to calculate again how many lines of bricks are we going to make. I think it was 1 less in the end.
So also, as I said, simultaneously, already when there were a couple of walls up, we started to put the roofing. So the roofing also, there was no rain at the time. We were building in dry season, but however, the roof gave shadow for the works. But it's a simple corrugated tin roof, which is usually used for the purposes. These are bathrooms. We also, of course, did all the installation works, like you're doing it here, guys. And maybe
this is Omar, and he was really like the best guy on the construction site, and he knew so much that. Yeah, so for example, that was like this exchange that also Anja mentioned in the beginning. I mean, it was not that we came there to do something, but it was really like also learning from the local team a lot. And they were like 3 to 6.
It depended on the phase and the work. Yeah. And also we decided not to put any glazing, only to actually leave it open for the air, to leave the spaces open for the good ventilation. So we developed out of metal frames and just, you can see here, reinforcement mesh. We developed sliding doors that were covered with bamboo net that also allowed for good ventilation. So yeah, these were doors like this. And then with local weavers, we actually also made bamboo nets, and we placed them then later into, you can see it here, we placed the nets into these sliding doors. I think the novelty here were sliding doors because basically not many people use them in Gambia, I think. But we developed really simple technique, and it works very well with just small rollers, and they're put on the U-shaped steel profile. So they roll perfectly, and the kids love it, and they roll around like crazy now. Yeah, these are also of Omar, who was working on. We also decided to actually locals suggested for the final flooring to use the mixture of cement and broken shells. That's a kind of, they use it a lot there, and it's a kind of, we would call it in Europe a little bit like terrazzo. In Europe you would use stones, but they use broken shells. And that's really a masterwork of Omar and the other guys who were actually then doing this final thin layer of 3 centimeters of this floor. It's really super nice.
And that's the secondary roof. So we were also, I mean, when we arrived there, we were still looking for the solution, like which material could we use. And then we found this textile from a local, like really big market called in city of Serakunda. And then we agreed with the guy, he has like 100 meters of it, and then he delivered us. So this, the roof was like still to prevent from heating, but again, yeah, allowing the wind to go through.
Yeah, okay, and this is the bars for stretched textile. We continue. So you can see here, this is a finished roof and textile. And actually, as I said, you know, the hot air. I mean, this roof, the secondary roof, prevents from overheating the interior, because the tin itself, if it is only tin, it really gets too hot in the space. But this textile actually prevents the heat to completely enter the classroom, but it also, this hole here allows for ventilation, for hot air to go out of the space. So that was the idea.
And this is you will see later the toilet walls. And they this was really spontaneous, because kids were always running around us, because it was so interesting for them that we are there and that we are working. And then some students just allowed them also to paint on the boards that were then used as doors, and it became really nice element.
Yeah. So it's usually like this. Usually kids collaborate with us. They love being there, and yeah, of course, it's their space, so it's for them, and they designed this for us. And this is, as you see now, it's week 8 of finished building, and you can also see these niches that were used then for benches, and the benches actually turn towards the big space, the big courtyard space, which I didn't say in the beginning, that the local way of construction is actually, usually they build houses in the courtyards, and they build houses around the central courtyard, which usually has a mango tree, and also here 2 mango trees are already there, and another one, the ones we planted. So this is both sides of the building, and we really wanted the air actually, and also the views to pass in this cross direction. So the children, when in classroom, they can basically see to their small part with eucalyptus trees where there should be their playground, but they can also see to the right to the big courtyard. So that kind of a double-sided building. Yeah, this is it. So, yeah. Questions?
What preparation do you do with the students before you go to the site? Is there quite a lot of training back in Ljubljana, or is it very much you learn on the job?
Unfortunately, it's not enough of training, I would say, because our school, however, I mean, we try to do this design-build project, but we don't have a big workshop at the school. So we organize different workshops than everywhere else around the school. I mean, the trust that you saw that we tested, it was actually well on the site, in the school. But basically, all the other things we have to organize. But we don't do only, this sort of projects, we don't do only in Africa. We also work in Ljubljana. So students also, for instance, were working for Slovenian philanthropy for their house. So we were also practicing there. But it's different generations and then different knowledges. So this time, the team was super great. We had like 2 or 3 guys or 4 guys who really knew how to build everything. It was super. I mean, it was just amazing also for me as a mentor. I mean, it was just, I just admire them. But they knew how to do the bricklaying, they knew how to do the welding. So it was easy to collaborate with locals, and it was really easy to put the things up. But the answer is we don't do enough practical workshops. We do them, but not enough.
And it's always, like, from my perspective, because I joined one project in South Africa, not this one that Anja was showing, but for me as a student, this was really amazing experience. Like, same as probably now also you're experiencing when you're building, when it's actually like, okay, you see what you draw and then what you build, and you see that there are problems in between, and then, yeah, it's very real experience, I would say. And there, we don't have enough of this faculty. Yeah.
How, I mean, like, this kind of teaching is also not very common in architecture faculty. How supportive is like the University of Ljubljana with your initiatives?
It is. I mean, now they're getting quite proud, I would say. It is supportive. It's, also, if we consider our school, okay, we are, maybe I didn't say it, I mean, I teach design studio, but these are not my students. This is actually open for the whole school, and the students apply. I mean, we always say, whoever is interested in, and I mean, also what his or her professor thinks about, is it the right person to do it? So we open it for the whole school. And this year, 21 students, I think there were, from different design studios, and the school supports it. And the school, for instance, also gives some money, and also the rector this year gave some money from the budget for the funding, the rector of the university. So they're now acknowledging that these sort of projects are important. But it's not so common. I mean, not so many people do. We hope. But I'm quite optimistic about, because I know many other schools are doing it in Europe. It's not, we only joined I would say, the ongoing movement, so it's not so, so rare. But they're getting quite proud with the work we do.
I wanted to ask how you find or choose the places where you implement the projects, and how were the projects kind of accepted within the local community, and what was the feedback after completing the last projects? I mean, this year, how were the others going on afterwards? did you follow up? Like how was the process afterwards? Is there like a timeline of, is it just the construction, or is it also what's happening before and after, kind of within the frame of the village or place you're?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's actually different for every project. For instance, South Africa was in South Africa there was a huge college built by different European schools of architecture. Each of the schools contributed one or two buildings and contributed, how to say, built. But it was actually, the school was run locally. So, and it's still there, but now I think we were actually tracing the development of the buildings. Of course, the building with the use changed a lot, and but it's according to the needs of users. So I don't see the problem here. They were rather well kept, and then Nina actually was part of the same network initiative which built the school complex on the Wild Coast on the Indian Ocean. And the schools are actually then later on just locally run. And I think it was now 10 years ago, I think the Ituva now became part of state schools, which previously was a private one, but it was non-paying. It was for the kids from the township. And I think now it's in the network of public state schools. Uganda is another story. The NGO that we were working, usually, and I didn't say that, the NGOs usually come to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like local NGOs, they would contact you and ask.
Usually it's a link between locally based slash Europe based. I mean, it's both.
Cooperation.
Yeah, it's collaboration kind of thing. In Uganda, actually, it was a little bit different story because we were looking for partners. Because we stopped after 2 years in South Africa, there was a big crisis. And Slovenia is a very small and very fragile country with a fragile economy, and the crisis really struck us. So there was no way to do any kind of fundraising, to collaborate, to contribute also in further projects of this first network. But then after 5 years or 6 years, we said, okay, we can try again. And actually the way was that we first asked people from NGOs, Slovenian NGOs, if they know NGOs in Uganda. And they told us about a couple of NGOs. They think they are doing a good job. And we contacted actually 5 of them. And we basically said, do you need collaboration? Would you be interested in, doing things together? And all the answers were positive. Then in the end, we had Skype talks, discussions, and we decided for 2 of them to, and also we followed some recommendations, and we collaborated with 2 of them. And in both cases, they work locally, so they're based there on the site, and they care the buildings. Because the big one that you saw is for street kids facility, and there is this local NGO that takes care of this facility. So it's working well because they are constantly sending us reports, and even now they propose to make another phase. So and this in Gambia, it's the NGO that is based in Slovenia and in Gambia, because it's run by a girl who's married to a local guy. So they're constantly basically spending more time in Gambia than in Slovenia. So.
How do you get the money for all of those? Because there's traveling, there's a lot of...
it was, I just didn't say it, but it's in the presentation. Actually, you can, I think Sonia uploaded it already, or will upload it. The accommodation, travel expenses are covered. We have a special scholarship, national scholarship, and students apply for this scholarship, which is actually a scholarship for training or workshops abroad. And they cover travel expenses. Students get €700 per for travel, and they also get 100 euros per week. So this is covered. I mean, our expenses are basically covered, but for the construction itself, it depends on the. Each year it's a little bit different, but the basic costs are between 30 to 40,000 euros. The big building, I mean, like this. So we do either fundraising and then we do events, but basically we do it through grants. That's the strongest part is grants. We apply at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which at the Department for Development Aid and Humanitarian Aid, and there are several other small ones, but a lot of work is done through students, just they're collecting money in events.
So I think it's thank you for the presentation, it was very interesting. I think it's a very important work, but my question is, what about the consequences on local, I don't know, I was thinking about schools or universities. Are they going to apply these models of building techniques and working methodologies also, for example, in Gambia or in South Africa or London?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a good question. It's always a little bit of speculation in it. Will it work or will it not work? For instance, South Africa, we use the technique of these straw and clay walls with expectation that it may be used in township because it's a cheap technique. Because we were basically we were building in township in shack area. People usually live either in shacks or in RDP. Housing programs built by South African state. And these are small houses built out of cement bricks, concrete bricks. And we actually wanted to introduce this technique into the township. And the builders that worked with us, they built a couple of houses. Then Tavo built, we didn't build Tavo, but one of the workers, for instance, for himself, exactly, he built a house out of straw and brick, and then they started the technique. And also, some other guys started the small business later. We even helped later a little bit with some support for welding to improve his welding techniques and so on. So it gets, it's a speculation, but I'm really happy if I see one thing, it's going further. So. And also, for instance, for Uganda, for this earth compressed bricks, actually the idea is that this organization, this NGO, would actually produce the bricks themselves to sustain financially themselves. So the idea is really to use it as much as possible in local communities because it's cheaper and it's more sustainable. But I mean, let's not talk so much about sustainability because it's
in South Africa, maybe I can add to this project that I was part in South Africa because there were the project was designed in this way that every classroom was its own building. So there were actually a lot of groups coming, and there was then a constant local team or like a core local team that was paid. I mean that it was like their job. So, and then also what was with our building, it was planned as 4 classrooms, and we did 2 of them, and then the other 2 would be symmetrical. So we, because we worked together, and then we let them to finish the other 2. That was, the effect or the concept.
Yeah, but it always depends actually on the one who is running. Who is staying there, because we go, It's not that we would not care, but we build it and we go and then we keep contacts.
Okay. I think we also need to be very careful when we talk about introducing techniques to cultures, especially in the sense of like Johannesburg, South Africa, when we're talking about introducing straw and clay architecture, which was there for years, and then through colonization they took it back, changed it into townships, to integrate them into being like working class citizens for these like settlers. That's what it is. So yes, I think we need to also be careful of the vocabulary that we use in architecture in these situations. Also, I had a question because in the beginning, for me as a Gambian that works in sustainability and education, the why is very important to me, and I didn't get enough information on the why the project was necessary, because there's so many European countries that come to Gambia and are like, we're helping, we're building a school, and they it basically seems like not necessarily a summer break project to come and practice this thing that kids don't have really good training on, we build this thing, there's no follow-up after on schools or hospitals that they build. And for example, for the school situation where you have people that come and build schools, and the teachers that come and teach in these schools come and abuse these kids, sexually traffic these kids to tourists. This is a reality. It's a reality. I'm just saying. So for me, again, the why is super important. So why? I think you kind of touched on why or how do you choose these countries, but why do you think these projects are necessary? Especially for the type of education as well. I think that we're too focused on Western Euro education, and I personally work in alternative indigenous education. So why build this model of schools? Why focus on building this building for this type of education? Why do you think it's necessary? I'm curious. I want to know because it's something that happens a lot. So I just want to know why.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So,
there's no straight answer to it.
Yeah, it's so many ways.
It's very it's very fragile. I mean, the question is, of course, the first question that we are asking our country: why don't you build in Slovenia?
Yeah.
We do. It's we do a lot of, let's say, voluntary, not only voluntary, but a lot of things that are needed to be done and they are not done by anyone else. For instance, we work with migrants, we build with them in the asylum center and so on. But we were, in terms of Gambia, we were approached by this NGO, which works on both sides, and is partly locally run. And they actually presented us a problem of hard education for majority of the kids, which I think is true. It's not such a, however we call it, seed. There is, I would say, maybe this is my European view, but still, I don't think that all the kids in Gambia have opportunity to go to a, let's say, not only good school, but a school. So for me, really, as I said, I'm coming from a country with a socialist past and with a really strong belief in universal right to education. I think that the work of this kind of NGOs is important or necessary. I would say in all the history of NGO and humanitarian aid, there is a big problem. Because actually all these organizations took part where actually the state should take care of. And the problem is, the system itself that allowed a lot of, the burden of the state, like taking care of social security, education, health security, actually it failed. And now it's filled in through the gaps of the work of NGOs, which is problematic in itself, in general. I agree with you. But at least I'm not 100% in the success of these projects. I'm asking myself all the time. It's not. don't think that I'm really happy. Just we go there, we build something, we go on. No, it's all the time these questions come up. But I think maybe you say that your education system is good. No, you said
what kind of education?
So for instance, this NGO actually proposed this learning complex to be based also on vocational training, which is
Good night.
on vocational training, to educate young people in terms of get a little bit better job opportunities, which I don't believe is a bad option, which I don't really agree with this NGO, I'll say it now really publicly. I don't agree with their voluntary, with the system of voluntary work. I don't believe in this. So I don't believe in us Europeans going for holidays in Gambia and teaching in the school. I don't agree with this, and I don't think it's right. But still, I think if they employ local teaching staff, develop their own kind of techniques, because they're in the process, it's not like non-approved by the state, it's in the process of being approved by the National Ministry for Education. And I think if the staff is local, and I think then, the things start to get, reason. I don't believe in this, that, Europeans come there for holidays and do the teaching and so on. So, it has many plus and minuses. But I think, for instance, for this earth compressed brick techniques, I think it's a good opportunity. However, you think it's maybe new. It's basically not such a new technique, and I think it should be considered as a maybe more sustainable way of construction than maybe cement bricks.
But we've been doing it. It's like a European thing. When the British came, they started building with cement. We've never traditionally built with cement.
You're right. Yes, but now it's going on in cement bricks. So.
The compressor blocks is a new thing.
Compressed, that's a new thing.
You have the dough, compressed dough. Compressor blocks is a new thing. And the thing about the difference with the traditional adobe and compressor blocks is the kind of quality of the compression that you have, and also one thing that is really important. The relationship of people that have with earth is for poor. So when you come with a compressor block, you have a different image. And when you put only 1% of cement or 2%, it's not doing anything there. It's not doing anything. But that goes in their minds that cement is there, so it's better. So it's only mind not working with the earth there. It's not doing anything.
And it's actually not, also the technique itself. It started in Kenya, and then from Kenya, actually a little bit moved around in different countries, and it's basically it's really useful technique, I would say. I mean, if you are into the studies of sustainability, maybe you should really think about it, because it's easy to make, it's on the side, and it's actually sustainable also in terms of time. It stays for a long time. So it's why not, I would say. Also, I mean, when we were working with students from GPTI, they were also quite impressed by it. They're used to work with cement bricks, but they were really happy to try together with us also, like, new techniques. Why not? I mean, if it is, in a way, basically for the same money, you maybe get a better building. Why not? So it was not just us, we were really working also with that.
One of the experiences that I have from talking with people that used to work with adult, for example, in Portugal, is, and I believe this happens all over the world, is normally the traditional techniques are connected with poor, but also with the very hard work. Okay, it's not so easy. Normally, the earth would be pressed with the feet from children, and then they come with that memory that it's a hard work, and when it's mixed with fibers, that hurts the feet. Here in Portugal, you would have lime mixed, and that they had the feet bare feet, so they're coming with with the feet really with a lot of scratches and also open. So this mind is there. Compressed earth blocks is a different image. It's not so hard, it's hard. It's not such an easy thing, it's hard, but it changes the mind and it's easy for them to make. And also, it can become industry, so like it happened there. So that can become a new thing that you can go into the market as an expert and you can sell that.
But it's difficult to do it in Gambia. I work with a school that does compressed block people,
Yeah, everywhere it's difficult because it's still something that people don't know and are still trying to understand. But it's something that comes new and you can come with something that you have that the other ones don't have. Okay, so.
Just that I would like to add to this question something. I think it's really important, Yanni, what you're stressing there, like this question.
Yes.
Nonetheless, I also think that if you look at things like a little bit how they're done, and I think in this case, like you've been stressing both on the fact that you're trying also to learn from the people that you're working with, and it's you. I understand that. Again, it's maybe it's my white man look at things, you know. But I do have the feeling that there's an intention of an exchange and of like enriching each other's background. And I would not put out of the equation also the students that come to do these kind of projects, because as you are learning among yourselves and exchanging and participating in a social project abroad, it's funny, like between parents, it's a question I never get. Why am I doing a project? I mean, I'm asked why did I come to Portugal, but why am I working here in a foreign country where there are other rules, where there are, you know, no, because I'm a white man in a white country. So, but yeah, just I think like if things are done with care in a way, you know, of course it's critical, of course it's tricky. There is a past, there is a history that you cannot forget at all. But it should not stop us from exchanging.
I would also add to this because I myself ask the same questions, of course. Why do we go there, and why do we go there as such a big group, and what do we contribute, and why is there? Then when I made a trip to the inside of Gambia, there was like, really in every village there was a school. So there was, it didn't look like we are building the only school, and there was also not like something that I would really say or think in advance. And I would also like ask anyone who would, like for future students who would like to go, why are they going? And if they would answer that they go to help, like I would ask again, because I think it's so, it's then like seeing the picture only from one side, and the point of this, no matter like how many schools there are, is I think like, the relation and building up connections and teaching each other how to be together and how to do things together. And I think the most like how you can learn about another person is when you work with him or her, without like, no matter the country, no matter the race. And then I think this is like something that is hidden inside these projects, and it can come out, but it doesn't mean that it happens like for 25 students who are there, because some were like interested in locals and some were like interested in project, which is also fine. But I would say like this is then my point of how I see it and why I do it also.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.